Alright, let's get started, I guess. My personal recommendation of how to play this game on emulator or PC or whatever. Yes, basically, Sword Art Online Internal Factor is actually alright, I guess. Nothing special. But if you would like to play this game, my personal recommendation would be on the PC with the Bluestacks emulator because it makes the gameplay much better in my opinion than on the mobile phone, and it's actually a bit more precise, but I think this is on personal experience and also taste. Now onto the basics. What emulator would I recommend? I personally would recommend Bluestacks, or at least I had the best experience with Bluestacks so far, because when I tested this game on Nox, it was kind of terrible, lagged pretty hard, and also quite unresponsive. Not to mention, there were some glitches and issues. As for Bluestacks, for now, I've been playing for like weeks with it. It's quite amazing. Another selling point for the reason why you should choose Bluestacks over Nox would be displayed later on. But first of all, before we actually go over the key sets, which are over here, we shall actually talk first about the overall things you should change in Bluestacks. So let's go over settings and see what my personal settings are for Bluestacks, and that might work for you as well. Things to note by here are that my PC basically is actually quite strong. It's not really quite weak. It's more like a end rig PC from 3 years ago. Now I would say it's mid-tier, but it's still quite strong from today's perspective. So I actually maxed everything out that you can possibly do. Full HD is more than enough. You don't really need more resolution. You can try it, but I don't really see a reason why you should. As for the engine, you should actually go for OpenGL. You can try something else that is used advanced graphics engine mode, but this will actually kind of glitch the game and make some weird bugs, weird texture issues, and some weird things might happen. Not to mention it might crash quite often. So you might as well turn this off just for this game. You can try it for other Bluestacks game, but maybe not on this one. Yes, to use your GPU to actually make the game much more stronger and better. This is something to actually increase the texture of the game. Is something I also would not recommend as for now, because it's still kind of buggy for SAO IF. You might as well leave it off. As for the RAM, take as much RAM as you can, in my opinion. It never hurts, only except if your PC is quite weak, then you might as well go to medium. As for low, not really, because this actually might break the game at all, or it's not really like break the game, but it's barely playable because it doesn't really have as much RAM to work with. As for the FPS, I mean, 60 is actually more than enough, but I just max it out. The sad thing is actually it's not really 240 FPS, but if it's fluent, it's really fluent. You can try to work around with it, but I'm not really sure if it actually has any impact on the game. And try it out for yourself. I am not really sure for this one, so I just left it as it is. As for preference, I think there's nothing really too important. Short keys hasn't been changed yet, and this just stays as that. Then we shall actually save the changes and go over to the game. So you open up the game, you boot it up, and you are on the menu. First things first, before you actually do anything else about this, you might as well actually change the user interface, or at least this is something I personally would recommend. The user interface of this game is, I guess, okay, but it's a bit too large. So you might as well turn it as small as you can, because normally it would be this huge. And yeah, if you play it on the PC, it's kind of not really great. So you might as well turn it as small as possible. Then you have a bit more space to work around with. I mean, on the phone it might be different, but because you play on the PC, It's actually much more comfortable in my opinion. That being said, the rest is actually up to you. I mean, of course, it depends. If you need all those settings, they don't really have any impact. As for the graphics, let's go over the graphics. I mean, I turned everything on max. That is another issue that does not really work on the Nox emulator in example. I haven't tested Memu, but I'm actually quite happy with Bluestacks so far. So just turn it off as much as you can. I mean, it didn't really had a negative impact on me personally. It might actually do if way too many people are in a single location, then it actually might stutter a bit, but not as bad as Nox, or at least in my experience. That's about it. Another thing that I personally would recommend actually would be maybe to make the transparency of the chat actually off, so you can actually read everything. Not to mention, also from the control scheme, turn the camera as fast as you can, especially because you work around with the mouse and not really with a touch screen. It actually might make make the camera rotation much more smoother and faster. In example, as you can see, much better. So if in example, if you walk around, feels much more snappier, more cleaner, and faster, of course, and it's much more responsive. So in example, if you are in a tight battle, you can actually just rotate really fast and yeah, work around with it. If the camera rotation is way too slow, then it might actually be problematic and you take forever to actually see anything happen. So this is something I personally would recommend really much. Now that being said, actually, we finished everything, so that's about it. Now the only thing that we need to do would be do a workaround with the key sets. As for the key sets, there are several things that we have to keep in mind. I personally would say the best thing is that as long as you have the basic, you can do everything you can do whatever you want. So let's go over my key set settings. As you can see, I got some normal key sets, some movements, a bit of a rotation, which I will explain later on. Of course, zoom in and zoom out, some normal buttons, and some scripts which I actually have placed over here, and I will explain later on why I have those scripts, and they make your life much more easier, trust me. Now everything set and done, we actually can start working with it. So the basics would be, of course, WASD. This is the most important one. Scale it up so it can actually change your movement. What I would also recommend is actually maybe to look a bit closer in it. The main thing would be the speed, because if it's way too fast, then you actually might stutter while walking. So you might turn it low. My personal experience would be 200. My personal recommendation would be 200. This is the best thing I actually had so far, and it feels way snappier than having it too fast. Trust me, this isn't really something that you really want to have, in my opinion, because especially if you make auto tag resets. Let me show you an example. If you make auto tag resets, especially notice at the bow, you'll keep want to walk one direction. Something that I personally do would be actually to keep pressing WASD. And this is something you can't personally really do if you have it way too fast. So now that have been said, what about the other buttons? M for maps is actually quite self-explanatory, because the great thing is you just walk around, press M, and you can press M again and the map will close by. It helps actually a lot for orientation, and this is something that you want to keep at all costs, especially if you walk around in a dungeon or some other location that might be a bit more confusing. Or actually overall, yeah, it might help a lot. Now these buttons are preferences, and you can do however you want. 1, 2, 3, 4 are my personal choice. You can actually place them wherever you want. I just place them like this because they are quite easier to reach. They're not that far from WASD. As for the switch method, I just chose Alt. You can choose whatever you want, whatever is most comfortable for you. R for rush, which is necessary once you actually unlock this feature. Tab to switch the weapons, also quite self-explanatory, and this is something I will explain later on. for the item usage. Now, something that in my opinion would be the selling point why you should choose Bluestacks over Nox would be the chat system. As you can see, I placed enter here so I can actually write stuff. And yeah, these buttons here are just to switch the chat window, which is actually quite convenient because, as some of you might know, the chat system of the game is actually a bit bad. So if you press enter, then the chat window will appear and you can type whatever you want. And if you press enter again, it actually just sends out. So let's do this again. As you can see, it's quite fast. The problem of the Nox emulator is basically that you have to press enter, write something, and then you can't just repress enter again to enter your text. You have to actually click outside with the mouse, which is actually quite painful because, as you can see, the chat system of SAO IF is actually quite restrictive, and you actually have to keep entering like this. So being able to press enter multiple times without actually having the restriction to enter, press, enter, type, mouse, enter, type, mouse thing makes life so much more easier. So this is why another thing why I chose Bluestacks over everything else. Yeah, NP, G, H and stuff are actually quite self-explanatory because you basically want to switch the chat window occasionally. Another thing I actually did was to put the I button on party recruit. This is something I did because I was a bit used to this on World of Warcraft, so I kept this feature here. It's not really that convenient, but it's alright, I guess. Now, to the more complicated parts that I added for myself would be the F and the F1 function to use my items. Basically, with the F key, I can see what items I have in my inventory. And currently I only did it for F1, but you can also do it for the other places to basically make a small macro function to use an item and close it again. It would look something like this. And this is actually really convenient if you are in a fight and it's kind of tight, so you don't really have to, like, you know, open this up, press the items and close it again or something. You basically just made a small macro. And I have a macro for several features, not only this. Well, let's have a look, of course. Oops, this is not what I wanted. We go to the scripts, and this is the script I actually wrote over here. You can write it just like that or something similar, but how you write a script is something that Bluestacks actually will explain you down below. Just check it out for yourself, and if you have any questions left, just ask Bluestacks or maybe their community. They might have a better idea for that. Another script that I basically did was for my bag, for sitting, because these are kind of, I mean, not really mandatory, but something I actually really like to have. Basically for sitting, it's just basically opening the emote and then instantly press the sit button and the character will sit down. As for the bag, you just basically open the menu and go towards your bag. It's not really the most beautiful thing, but because of how the game is designed, but it's alright, I guess. This is something that I'm not really sure if I still want to keep. It's basically open the avatar menu, and L is just to check out the quests. Let's have a test. As you can see, this is my character. I want to sit. This is where my mouse is. I'm not clicking anything. And it's working, as you can see. The character is sitting, and this is something I actually use in every kind of MMO. Basically, if I'm just grinding stuff, then I'm done grinding it, then I just want to have a sit, because I just want to sit. I mean, this is more like a muscle memory for me, so it's a feature that I really think is something that is necessary for me. You don't really have to, but it's not bad. Another thing would be, what I forgot would be the sprint and the attack key or the interaction key. Basically space for sprint, quite self-explanatory, and right click for attacking, which is actually much more convenient, especially if you played action MMORPGs like Phantasy Star Online or some other games, so it's actually much more comfortable, trust me. Another thing that you actually might want to have would be zoom in and zoom out, quite self-explanatory, just scale how large it should be and it will actually react. Another thing that you might need to consider would be the speed, but this is actually not really that important. The speed is only necessary if the zoom function is not working. Yeah, let's test the other scripts. Meanwhile, we had sit, as you can see. Then let's open our bag. And the great thing about the bag thing is actually you can just re-enter B and it will close again. What's kind of annoying is basically it will still repeat the same function, same macro, but the bag is at least closed. So be careful if you are fighting or are on the field and want to rotate your camera, because let's say like this, you want to open your bag is open, you are walking, and like it can actually interfere with the mouse rotation. So keep that in mind. Same thing goes to quests. To check how the quests are working and what kind of quests I have. This is something you don't really have to. It's something I just really like to have to see if there's anything I have to complete. Another thing that I actually got used to World of Warcraft. And of course, at last, I think it was the character, which is C. Basically just opening my equipment. The bad thing about the equipment part is basically, yeah, you can't really just re-enter C and get out. You have to do it manually. And it's actually kind of annoying, but it's, yeah, this is the reason why I'm actually reconsidering if I really want to. So, just some these were just some nitpicks, scripts, key sets that I made myself. You can of course do it for yourself as well. And at last, this is maybe the only feature that I would actually consider. It's up to you. Basically, I took the free look camera and placed it at Q and E. This is something I use it for, I kind of use for every MMO. Basically, if you go straight forward and then you can just rotate yourself without needing the mouse. It's actually quite convenient because, as you can see, you don't really need the mouse and you just want to rotate. The mouse is something I would personally just often quite use for combat, because in combat, you want to use your mouse active and press right click to attack. But yeah, that's about it. Of course, if you are something used to FPS games, then holding the mouse and rotating might be a bit annoying, but this is something, in my opinion, that it's not really that bad, because I'm used to World of Warcraft with this. In this game, you actually had to hold on to your left click as well to rotate, or was it right click? I don't remember, but this is a feature I don't really mind. And I think that's about it, I guess. And this is my personal recommendation how you should maybe set up the game so you can actually play this game on the PC much more snappier. The guides or the controls recommendation I saw on the internet, not that they are bad, but they are something I would actually rather not use, because what I saw was that they placed their camera rotation on the keyboard as well, and they basically never used the mouse for this game, and it's something I felt is kind of dumb, not really dumb, but like not convenient to play, especially because you have to click around the menu a lot, and switching over to mouse keyboard might be a bit more tiring. So this is maybe the setup I personally would recommend. And I also saw some player that basically just used the WASD and click around with the rest with the mouse, and you can do that, but it's really inconvenient. And I mean, it's basically like you have to do this the whole time, and yeah, how do you want to rotate while you do this? It's really not that great and snappy or whatever. Especially if you are someone like me who likes to kite around a lot, this is really kind of necessary, because you have to rotate a lot, sprint, and basically use your buttons at the same time, and it makes your life much more easier. So this is around it. Here, just a last look of everything I did. Let's make a quick summary. Basically, WASD, quite self-explanatory. I for party recruit, not something you don't really have to, but it doesn't hurt. QE, I mean, up and down are kind of meh. I don't really use them, but these two are kind of the necessary part for me. Something that you should also look into would be the swipe speed. Might help out. Isn't necessary, but might help. Zoom in, zoom out, something I would personally say is a must-have, especially if you glitch around and you accidentally zoom in or zoom out. You might want to have that as well. These are mandatory and self-explanatory. I won't go deeper into them, as well as for them. Something that I personally would recommend to set right click on here, but you don't really have to. Space, also, yeah, preference, but not really necessary. I mean, you can switch them around, but I think this is actually the much more comfortable way to play the game. Now, the chat windows, of course, do whatever you want. Enter. This is the selling point of Bluestacks, in my opinion, and the reason why you want to use Bluestacks instead of the other emulators. If the other emulators run this game much more smoother and have this feature as well as Bluestacks, then I might switch because yeah, it might run fluid and it might be better than Bluestacks, but so far Bluestacks is the best emulator for this game that I have experienced so far. Scripts, of course, you don't really have to use them. It's only something that I personally enjoy using and often quite use, except the C one. You don't really have to. And that's about it, I guess. Now that we have gone over them all, this is only a small nitpick from me, but you can do this as well. Basically, if you right click on a feature, you can disable the overlay, so you don't really see it in the game inside. The only thing I kept inside would be those 4 buttons. So basically, I remember what key it was to switch over the windows, and as well as for the F key, just to see, just to remember, oh yeah, I have to press F1 to heal or something, in case if I forgot. It's just a small reminder here. Of course, healing is not everything. There are some some antidote, some burn heal or whatever. You can place whatever you want, and you might as well, if you really think so, make a screenshot button. But in my opinion, if you play on a PC, you don't really do screenshots in this game. And if you do, there's a function in Bluestacks somewhere on here that you can use for yourself, or basically just use, you know, the print screen button from the PC itself. Might be a bit much faster because you have it saved up and you can place it on your Discord or whatever place you ever want. So with that being said, I hope that this button setup, key setup, might actually be good for you guys, and maybe if you have better suggestions for me to change things up, then write it down below in the comment section, and I hope I could help out.